Welcome to another story made by Oracle 1. The Night Feeder. On the outskirts of a forgotten rural town nestled deep within the contours of rolling hills and tangled woods, there was a barn, weathered and weary with age. It had stood there for decades, a silent guardian of the family's legacy, its timber darkened by nearly a century of storms, sun, and seasons that turned fields to gold and then to barren earth. The farm, once prosperous, had grown desolate with time. Fewer hands to tend the fields, fewer animals to fill the stalls. But in this quiet decay, a new horror was about to awaken. It began subtly, as all terrors do. Farmer Elias Granger was the first to notice. Each morning, he would rise with the dawn and make his rounds, inspecting the barns and pens. His eyes, weathered but sharp, immediately caught on the fresh, unnatural scratches found along the old wood planks of the barn walls. Long, deep grooves gouged into the aged timber. At first, he assumed it was a wild animal, maybe a raccoon or a fox, desperate for shelter or some forgotten grain. But those scratches were not the soft, random markings of a small animal. No, they were frantic. Almost as if something wild and desperate was trying to claw its way inside. Elias tried to shake off the unease gnawing at him as he inspected the marks that morning. The sun was rising, casting a golden glow over the fields, but the barn's shadow stretched long across the dirt, like a dark finger pointing toward a foreboding unknown. Those first nights, the barn was alive with strange noises. Deep, guttural scraping echoed against the hollow wood. It started as a light tapping, then transformed into urgent clawings and scrapes that echoed louder each night, as if whatever was responsible was growing stronger. The animals inside were restless. The old horse, Betsy, would whinny uneasily, stamping the ground. The cows lowed softly but with a tone of distress. Chickens clucked in a frenzy, fluttering and piling atop one another in the corners of the co-op attached to the barn. Then the disappearances began. It was old Martha, Elias' wife, who realized something had changed that first morning after the noises crescendoed. She was a stern woman with a sharp tongue and the keen intuition of someone who had lived with farm life all her years. The milking cow they had depended on, a gentle giant named Marcy, was gone. No sounds of her lowing greeted the dawn, no familiar rustling in the hay. Puzzled, they searched the fields and nearby woods, but no sign of the cow was found. It was as if she had simply vanished. Elias forbade the neighborhood children from wandering near the barn after dusk, but the terror wrapping itself silently around the farm only tightened its grip. Night fell, and with it came the noises that stole the sleep from every living thing. The clawing returned that night, louder than before, almost desperate. The moonlight barely carved out the jagged outlines of the barn as the strange sounds rose like a chorus of unseen things scrabbling at every surface. The animals grew more panicked, their eyes reflecting the faint glow of lanterns as Elias and Martha watched from the farmhouse window. The next morning, the loss was more severe. The rooster, a strutting creature named Big Jack, was nowhere to be found. The pens were trashed and turned topsy-turvy, the fence torn in places no animal could manage. It was as if a hurricane had descended on the farm during the night. But no storm passed through. Just a persistent threat clawing at their sanctuary. Fear began to poison the air that once held the warmth of simple country living. That night, Elias gathered the few remaining animals into the main barn, bolting every gate and shutter he could fence. He lit a fire, his hands trembling as he grasped a long, rusted pitchfork that had once been his grandfather's. "Whatever it is," he muttered to himself, "it's not taking anything else on my watch." But the clawing grew bolder, the desperation and savagery clear now. The nails tore into the barn walls like weapons driven by hunger and madness. The scratches mapped a jagged hill across the old siding, carving deep ruts into the rotting wood. But when Elias shone his lantern against the planks, he saw not only the scratch marks but something more. Deep down in the scratches lurked faint impressions, slimy, blackened, as if some creature with scorching claws had clung to the barn's surface. Alongside that, patches of a peculiar, oily substance shimmered in the lantern light, reflecting an unnatural green, a residue unlike anything he had ever seen. Martha refused to believe at first that some beast was responsible. "Perhaps it's the wind," she said stubbornly. "A raccoon or a badger. Nothing more than animal mischief." But her strained voice, edged with more fear than reassurance, belied her certainty. The third night fell hard and black. The clawing grew deafening. It sounded like the very barn was being shredded to splinters. Elias stood on guard in the darkness, clutching his pitchfork, eyes struggling to pierce the velvet night. He heard it then, a guttural growl beneath the harrowed noise. A presence was close, unseen but undeniable. Suddenly, a chilling scream tore through the farm. The sound of one of the animals, unmistakably human in its agony and terror. Elias jumped to the door, throwing it open just in time to witness a shadow leaping away into the woods beyond the fields. In the dim lantern light, he saw Marcy's torn stall door flapping. A trail of viscous, dark fluid marked the ground, leading to the edge of the forest. That fluid was not blood, but something too thick and oily to be anything living, something alien. Elias and Martha, heart-pounding, followed the trail in the faint moonlight. Their steps slowed as thick fog started to curl and coil between the ancient trees, snaking across the cracked earth like ghostly fingers. The dark woods seemed to stretch unreasonably, the trees bending toward them as if whispering secrets of unthinkable dread. A stifled scream cut through the hazy night air again, deeper within the woods. They plunged onward, desperate to trace the missing animals, or at least find what was tormenting their home. Deeper into the woods the trail led to a small clearing that had once been a spring but was now choked with coarse weeds and sulfured mud. There, in the center, lay the remains of another animal. Not the cow this time, but the rooster, Big Jack. Its feathers were ripped away, the flesh underneath nothing but a glistening mass of black and red, almost melting into the ground beneath it. Before the horror could fully register, a low hiss slithered from the nearby thickets. Elias turned, eyes wide in the shadows, and caught a glimpse of something grotesque. A creature slinking with unnatural grace. Limbs bent at odd angles. Long, twisted claws flooding the air with the heavy stench of decay and rot. Its eyes glowed faintly amber in the moonlight, like molten gold drowned in shadow. A fetid breath hissed from its gaping mouth, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. Elias raised his pitchfork. The creature snarled, a sound like bones grinding, and leapt toward him with startling speed. But before it could reach, a piercing light burst from his lantern as Martha hurled it in desperation. It struck the creature with a wet splatter, momentarily stunning it. Elias struck the beast's side, the pitchfork digging deep as its claw swept past him, tearing his shirt but missing flesh. The creature yelped, rolling back into the darkness of the woods like a shadow fleeing light. Panting and bloodied, Elias looked down at his hands, smeared with alien black ichor from the creature, while Martha frantically grabbed a heavy chain from her belt. "We can't stay here," Elias whispered, voice brittle like dry bones. "It's hunting us, feeding off the livestock, growing bolder. This isn't natural." What is it?" Martha gasped. "I don't know," he admitted. "But it's been here longer than we think. I saw those scratches before animals began disappearing. It's hungry. And it feeds at night." With the first light of dawn nearing, they raced back to the barn to fortify what remained. But their hope was fragile. Over the coming nights, the clawing intensified, drawing closer and closer to the farmhouse itself. Animals were vanishing at an alarming rate, and whispering fears of the night feeder began to spread into the town below the hills. The locals dared not frequent the roads near the cursed farm after dark. Word was spread in hushed conversations, strange figures glimpsed against the trees, eerie sounds resembling the mix of human cries and monstrous growls, and an overwhelming stench that lingered in the air during the dusk. Elias and Martha found themselves locked in a nightmare growing worse with each day, accompanied only by the whispering woods and their dwindling cattle. One evening, Elias sat by the fire in the farmhouse, nursing a wound to his arm where the creature had clawed him. The pain was sharp, but deeper was the dread curling in his gut, the sense that this was not a single monster but something ancient, something tied to the land itself. His grandfather had once told him stories of dark spirits haunting the old woods, creatures born of the soil's corruption and the dark hunger of the earth that had once been unforgiving and cruel. He drank from his cup, staring through the window at the barn, where shadows moved just beyond the frame of moonlight. He knew the creature was watching, waiting for another chance. Martha came to him, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders. "We need help, Elias," she whispered. "This is beyond us." He nodded. Word needed to be sent beyond the quiet town limits, perhaps to someone versed in old lore, someone who understood the malign hunger scratching at their walls every night. That night, the clawing was relentless, louder than ever. The animals bellowed and screamed, and then, just as suddenly as it began, silence fell. A heavy, suffocating quiet that pressed against their eardrums and set their hearts pounding with terror. Morning brought a grisly discovery. The barn was shattered, its wooden walls and gates splintered and tossed aside like matchsticks. The stalls were empty, save for one horrifying sight. The carcass of their oldest horse, Betsy, sprawled across the floor. Her flesh was torn away in neat, deliberate gouges, but her eyes, wide open, told a story of helpless terror that no mere predator could inspire. But that was not the worst part. Written into the floorboards beneath her body, with what looked like blood and that same oily black substance, were claw marks of a different kind, scratches that formed symbols, strange, ancient glyphs that pulsed faintly as if alive. It was a language, something primal and wicked, speaking a curse. Elias bent low, tracing the marks with trembling fingers. His thoughts scattered. The work of beasts? Or something worse? A ritual, a summoning? Overwhelmed by dread yet determined to end the nightmare, Elias and Martha made a decision. They would confront the darkness face to face. Gathering all the salt and iron they could muster, along with sacred herbs Martha remembered their mother whispering about in old Appalachian tales, they prepared to cleanse the farm. Incense was lit. Salt lines drawn around every building and every pen. They prayed quietly, beseeching any god or spirit to stand with them. But as the sun set and the last ember's heat fell low, the clawings returned with a fury unlike before, mad and angry. They circled the farm, striking the defenses, but never breaking the salt lines. Outside the boundaries, Elias glimpsed a form, no longer just one monster, but a writhing mass of shadows and claws, eyes of flame, growling in a voice that ruptured the night air. A voice whispered into Elias's mind as though carried on a cold wind. It promised hunger, promised power, promised freedom if only the bindings were broken. But they did not falter. At dawn, the morning was still. The claw marks were gone, faded like a nightmare after waking, but the farm was scarred deeply. Animals were few and still afraid. The shadows in the woods remained longer than they should, as if watching, waiting. Some nights after, Elias would still hear the faint scraping at the barn walls, a reminder that the night feeder had not left. It had only retreated, biding time. Now, travelers passing the farm often speak of an eerie stillness, broken only by distant, desperate clawings, an echo of old hunger clawing at the remnants of the Granger farm. And sometimes, just before dawn, if you listen carefully, you can hear a whisper carried in the cold air, the promise of the night feeder's return. For more stories, like and subscribe.